I was the family disappointment. Until they found out I bought a mansion. I used to think disappointment had a sound. It wasn't loud. It wasn't some earth-shattering boom or a dramatic gasp of horror. No, disappointment in my family came in the form of sighs, the kind that deflated the room, that stretched out just long enough to make sure I knew it was directed at me. The weary, judgmental exhales my mother gave whenever I mentioned my plans. The tight-lipped silence from my father when I tried to share my successes. The barely concealed smirks from my siblings when they heard I was still trying to make something of myself. Disappointment wasn't spoken outright. It was in the way they looked past me at gatherings, the way they never quite remembered what I did for a living, the way my name was always followed by an uncomfortable pause, as if saying it too loudly might stain the air. I was the family failure, the outlier in a lineage of doctors, lawyers, and corporate executives. While my older brother Daniel basked in the glow of his six-figure salary, and my younger sister Emily flaunted her perfect suburban life with a husband who practically printed money, I was the one they whispered about, the one who chose the unstable path, the one who refused to listen, the one who could have done more. They never cared to ask what I was doing, what I was building, what I had sacrificed. They assumed they already knew. To them, success had a single definition: power, prestige, and the ability to say you had made it at dinner parties without a single trace of embarrassment. And by their standards, I was a letdown, an unfortunate blot on the otherwise pristine family record. I let them believe what they wanted. For years I endured their passive-aggressive remarks, their dismissive nods, the not-so-subtle ways they made it clear that I wasn't someone to be taken seriously. Family reunions were exercises in patience, as I listened to my mother gush about Daniel's latest promotion or Emily's picture-perfect home, while my own achievements, my struggles, my victories, were met with strained smiles and condescending pats on the shoulder. "You're still doing that little business of yours, right?" my aunt had once asked at Thanksgiving, her tones syrupy sweet with barely concealed derision. "That's nice. It's good to have a hobby." A hobby. I had built something from the ground up. I had worked sleepless nights, invested every ounce of energy into creating something that mattered. I had endured failures, setbacks, and moments where I thought I might lose everything. But to them, it was nothing more than an amusing side project, a phase they were waiting for me to outgrow. Fine. Let them think that. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. But I won't lie. Somewhere deep down, a small part of me had always wished, foolishly, that one day they would see me. Not as the failure, not as the one who never quite measured up, but as someone who had carved out their own path and thrived in it. I had long since given up hoping for their respect, but maybe, just maybe, they would finally acknowledge that I wasn't the disappointment they had made me out to be. That day came sooner than I expected. It happened the moment they found out about the mansion. The news spread through the family like wildfire, passed along through hushed phone calls and gasping revelations. My cousin let it slip at a gathering, her voice high-pitched with disbelief. "Wait, you didn't know? Oh my God, yeah, I saw it on social media. It's massive, like one of those estates you see in magazines." Silence. Then the floodgates burst open. The same family members who had spent years brushing me aside were suddenly scrambling for information. My mother, who had perfected the art of sighing in disappointment, called me the very next morning, her voice dripping with an enthusiasm I had never once heard directed at me. "Sweetheart," she cooed, as if she hadn't spent my entire life belittling me. "Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea you were doing so well." I let her words hang in the air. Hadn't I? Hadn't I tried once? Hadn't I sat at their tables eager to share my journey, only to be met with polite disinterest? Hadn't I watched their eyes glaze over, waiting for the moment they could pivot the conversation back to Daniel's investments or Emily's luxury vacations? They never cared about my success, not until it became something they could boast about. And now, oh, how the tides had turned. Within days, my inbox was flooded with messages from relatives who had barely spoken to me in years. Cousins who had ignored me at reunions suddenly wanted to catch up. My father, the same man who once told me to be realistic with my career, sent a stiffly worded text congratulating me, though I could almost hear the reluctance behind it. And then came the invitations. "We should have dinner soon," my mother suggested, her tone too casual, too eager. "Maybe at your place?" Emily, who had once laughed about how I would never be able to afford a real house, now gushed about how wonderful it must be to have all that space. Daniel, ever the golden child, played it cool, but I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Jealousy, perhaps? Resentment? I wondered if he had to contend with the idea that I was no longer the family failure, that maybe, just maybe, I had surpassed him. And then the real bomb dropped. "You know," my mother mused one evening over the phone, her voice light but calculated, "it's been so difficult for your father and me, keeping up with the house. It's just so much work, and we're not getting any younger." Ah, there it was, the unspoken suggestion, the delicate implication that my success should, in some way, benefit them. That, after years of disregard, I should now be the dutiful child, offering them comfort and luxury on a silver platter. I almost laughed. Almost. I held the power. They had written me off. They had dismissed me, belittled me, made me feel small. And now they stood at my doorstep, smiling wide, waiting for my forgiveness, my generosity, my invitation to let them back in. The question was, did they deserve it? I leaned back in my chair, staring at my phone, watching the messages pile up. 1,000 thoughts swirled in my mind, but one stood out above all others. I was no longer the family disappointment, and they would soon learn exactly what that meant. Silence can be a powerful thing. It can stretch, grow, take up space in ways words never could. And right now it sat between my mother's carefully chosen sentences, between the unspoken expectations and my father's stiff congratulations, between the flood of messages from cousins and aunts who had once acted as though I barely existed. I didn't respond to any of them, not immediately. Instead, I let them wait. And oh, how they waited. 3 days passed before my sister Emily broke first. She was always the impatient one, the golden girl of the family who had never known what it was like to be ignored. She called, and I let it go to voicemail. Not because I wasn't tempted to pick up, no. I wanted to hear the shift in her tone, the way her words might stumble now that she was no longer speaking from a position of superiority. The message came through minutes later, laced with forced cheerfulness. "Hey, wow, so I just heard about your place. That's amazing. I mean, really, I had no idea things were going that well for you. We should totally catch up. Maybe I can come see it? I mean, it must be huge. Probably too much space for just you, right?" I almost laughed at the thinly veiled probing. The way she framed it as though she was concerned, as if I needed company, when in reality, she just wanted to see if my success was real, to walk through my home and measure my wealth against her own. I said nothing. Let her sit with the uncertainty for a little longer. A few more days passed, and the messages began to change. The initial flood of curiosity and fake excitement started shifting into something else. Confusion. Frustration. Why wasn't I responding? For years, I had been the one on the outside, the one trying to fit into a family that had no space for me. I had always been the one who had to reach out, to fight for scraps of their attention. But now I was the one withholding it, and they didn't know how to handle it. The next call came from Daniel. He rarely bothered to call anyone in the family unless it benefited him, so I knew this wasn't some heartfelt attempt at reconnecting. I let it ring until his name disappeared from my screen, then played the voicemail. "Look, I don't know what's going on with you," he said, his voice clipped and impatient. "Mom and Dad are wondering why you're ignoring them. It's weird. You should at least give them a call, let them know what's going on. Also, I heard your place is in Westwood Hills. That's an expensive area. How the hell did you pull that off? I mean, congrats, I guess, but yeah. Call Mom." It was almost comical, the way he slipped that in at the end. The disbelief, the skepticism. It was killing him not knowing how I had done it, how the so-called failure had surpassed him. I could practically hear the calculation in his voice, the unspoken question. Did you really earn this, or did you just get lucky? He needed to know. They all did. And I wasn't giving them an inch. Not yet. I finally decided to respond a full week after the news had spread. Not with a phone call, not with an apology for my silence, but with a single message in the family group chat. "Been busy. Let me know if you want to visit." That was all. Nothing more. No explanation, No justification for my absence. I hit send and set my phone down, waiting. The reaction was immediate. Within seconds, the chat exploded. Mom. Oh, sweetheart, we would love to see you. This weekend, maybe? We can bring some food, make it a real family night. Emily. OMG. Yes, I can't wait to see it. Can I bring the kids? They'll love all the space. Aunt Caroline. Finally. I've been so curious. You always were full of surprises. And then, of course, Daniel. Daniel. Sounds good. Saturday at 6? No over-the-top excitement from him. No fake warmth. Just a simple agreement. But I knew my brother well enough to read between the lines. He was coming not to celebrate but to inspect. To pick apart every detail and figure out how I had managed to do something he never expected from me. Perfect. Saturday arrived. And with it, my family. I watched from the upstairs window as they pulled into the driveway, their expensive cars gleaming under the afternoon sun. My mother stepped out first, craning her neck to take in the massive estate before her. Her face was carefully neutral, but I knew her well enough to recognize when she was holding back shock. Emily was next, practically bouncing on her heels as she took out her phone, no doubt already planning what parts of the house to film for social media. Daniel moved more slowly, his gaze sharp, assessing. He didn't say anything as he stepped onto the stone pathway leading to the front door, but I caught the slight tension in his jaw. Good. Let him feel it. I opened the door before they could knock, and the expressions on their faces, equal parts awe, confusion, and a carefully controlled hunger, were almost amusing. Wow, Emily breathed, stepping inside as her eyes darted from the grand foyer to the sweeping staircase. I mean, wow. You really did well for yourself, my mother added, her voice softer now, her usual air of superiority tempered by something else. Uncertainty. I let them take it in. Let them wander through the towering halls. Let their fingers trail over the polished marble countertops. Let them step onto the balcony overlooking the vast backyard with its pristine gardens and infinity pool. Let them see, with their own eyes, just how wrong they had been about me. Dinner was a strained affair. They tried to fill the silence with forced pleasantries, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension beneath their words. It was in the way my mother kept glancing at me, as if trying to reconcile this version of me with the one she had spent years dismissing. It was in the way Emily asked me, 3 separate times, "So what exactly do you do again?" As if my success needed some kind of loophole. And it was in the way Daniel barely spoke at all, his mind clearly working through 1,000 calculations. And then, just as the meal was ending, my father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet the entire night, set down his glass and cleared his throat. "We're proud of you," he said, the words sounding forced, unnatural. "Really?" The table fell silent. My mother gave a small, approving nod. Emily beamed. But Daniel? Daniel smirked. I turned my attention to him, waiting. "You really surprised everyone," he said, leaning back in his chair, swirling the coffee in his glass. "No one saw this coming. Not even you, right?" Ah, there it was. The subtle jab, the attempt to diminish my success by making it seem like a fluke, like I had stumbled into it by accident. I met his gaze head on. "No," I said simply. I knew exactly what I was doing. Daniel had nothing to say. The power shift was complete. But as I sat there watching them, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. Because if there was one thing my family excelled at, it was finding ways to take what they thought they were owed. And I could already see it in their eyes. They wanted more. They wanted in. And I was about to make them work for every damn inch of it. The night ended with forced hugs, stiff goodbyes, and saccharine promises to do this again soon. I watched from the towering front windows as my family filtered out, their voices carrying in the night air, their silhouettes illuminated by the mansion's grand exterior lights. Their cars rolled out of my estate, one after another, and I stood there, unmoving until the last pair of taillights disappeared into the distance. Then, and only then, did I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They wanted in. I had seen it in their eyes, heard it in the measured way they spoke, felt it in the way they lingered just a little too long in certain rooms, their fingers grazing over the expensive surfaces as if trying to claim them. For years they had dismissed me, and now they were circling back, their hands outstretched, expecting warmth, forgiveness, inclusion. They thought I would welcome them back. They thought wrong. The next week was a spectacle. The family group chat, once a barren wasteland where my messages went ignored or received half-hearted responses, was now an endless stream of conversation. My mother sent daily messages, always framed with the kind of forced casualness that didn't fool me for a second. Mom, good morning, sweetheart. How are you? Did you sleep well? Mom, your father and I were thinking of stopping by this weekend. Maybe bring some groceries? We can help stock your fridge. Mom, by the way, have you thought about hosting Thanksgiving at your place this year? It would be so much easier for everyone. Emily followed suit, but her approach was different, louder, pushier. Emily, so I was telling Jake about your place, and he was like, wow, we should totally visit again. Maybe a weekend trip? Emily, you know, you've got so much extra space. I was thinking, what if the kids and I stayed over sometimes? The guest wing is practically a second house. Then came Daniel, whose pride wouldn't let him beg outright, so he did what he always did. He prodded. Daniel, you still haven't told me how you pulled this off. Seriously, though, what's your secret? Stocks? Crypto? Some kind of business move? I won't judge. Daniel, you ever thought about investments? You're in the perfect position to start making some real money. I've got some ideas. Let's talk. And then, the boldest move yet, my mother called me one evening, her voice dripping with forced warmth. You know, sweetheart, your father and I have been talking, and we realized that taking care of our house has just become so much work, she said with an exaggerated sigh. It's really too big for us now, but moving at our age, it's such a hassle. I said nothing, waiting. And then we thought, why move at all? She continued, the faux innocence in her tone making my stomach churn. I mean, you have all that space, that beautiful house, so much room. It just makes sense, doesn't it? We could all be together, like a real family. There it was. The mask had slipped. They didn't just want access. They wanted in. They wanted a piece of my success, a place in my home, an anchor in the wealth they had once mocked me for chasing. My parents wanted to move in. Emily wanted to use the mansion as a personal vacation home. Daniel was already scheming, already looking for a way to latch onto what I had built. And every single one of them thought I would say yes. Because that's what family does, right? Family forgets the years of mockery. Family overlooks the way they dismissed you, ignored you, made you feel less. Family expects you to be grateful just for their presence. I was supposed to be grateful. I was supposed to forgive. I was supposed to open my doors and welcome them inside. Instead, I smiled, and I made my decision. 2 days later, I sent out a single message to the group chat. Me. Hey everyone, I've been thinking a lot about things and I'd love to have you all over this Saturday. Let's have a real family dinner. My treat. The responses came instantly. Mom. Oh sweetheart, we would love that. Emily. Yes, I'm so excited. Should I bring coffee? Daniel. Finally. Looking forward to it. They thought they had won. They thought I had caved. They thought Saturday was going to be the night I welcomed them back into my life permanently. It was going to be the night I shut them out for good. The dinner was lavish. I made sure of it. I hired private chefs, had a full-course meal prepared, aged steaks, truffle pasta, an array of dishes so rich, so extravagant, that my mother gasped when she saw the table. They ate, they drank, they laughed, they thought they had me. It wasn't until dessert arrived that I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and let the final blow land. I've made a decision, I said, my voice steady, measured. About the house. They all perked up. My mother beamed, already certain she had won. My father nodded approvingly, as if he had known all along that I would do the right thing. Emily grinned, practically vibrating with anticipation. Daniel said nothing, but his eyes locked onto mine, studying me, waiting. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke. I'm selling it. The room froze. The shift was almost imperceptible at first, just a subtle tension in their shoulders, a flicker of confusion in their expressions. Then, as my words sank in, their smiles faltered, their postures stiffened, and the energy in the room darkened. What? Emily blurted out, her voice too sharp. You're selling it? My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be ridiculous. Why would you sell such a beautiful home?" I met her gaze. "Because I can." Silence. They didn't know what to say. They had expected generosity. They had expected an open door, a permanent invitation. They had never once considered that I might simply walk away. "Where are you going?" Daniel finally asked, his voice unreadable. "Does it matter?" I countered, tilting my head. "I've already made up my mind." "But this is your home," my mother insisted, her voice rising slightly, the edges of her composure fraying. "Why would you leave?" I let my eyes drift over each of them, taking in their carefully constructed facades, the thinly veiled disappointment in Emily's expression, the barely concealed anger in my father's posture, the silent calculation in Daniel's stare. And then I said the words I had waited my whole life to say. "Because I don't need to prove anything to you." I stood, just like that. No grand speech, no dramatic farewell. I had wasted enough years trying to earn their respect, their approval, their love. But respect wasn't given. It was taken. And I had already won. As I walked out of that dining room, out of my mansion, out of their expectations, I felt nothing but satisfaction.